In this example, we're going to extend on the work that we did in example 1 by adding a button to our window. A button is a very simple user interface component, and it's one of the main ways users interact with Windows systems. We're very used to clicking on buttons that say OK or submit or cancel and so on. So we want to just add a simple button to our window. Before we do that, we're going to take a little step back and look at where the actual program begins. All programs have an entry point, and the entry point to our program at the moment is the main method. Inside the main method, we create a window object, and then we have this basic system output, which prints the message we are here in the main window to the kind of standard output. So if our program has this main method as its entry point, when we create our window object, it also has a point of entry, and that is a special method called a constructor. So if we just compile and run the program that we have here at the moment, we'll see that our window gets created and our output appears in our console window down here. Now at the moment this window doesn't have a title. So when this window came into being, when it got created, a special method called a constructor method for that window got called. Now we didn't supply a constructor method in our code, so at the moment a default constructor method is getting called when this window is brought into being. So this window also has a point of entry, just like our program has a point of entry, but this window's point of entry is a special method called a constructor method. So one way to illustrate how that works is we're going to set the title of our window. So let's quit out of this and we will add a special method in here called a constructor method. So constructor methods are declared as follows: public, and then the name of the method is week 10 example 2. At the moment it's not going to take any arguments, and that's how it's declared. Now you'll notice that it doesn't have a return type. It doesn't have void or static or int or double here after the keyword public. So constructors do not return anything. They're a very special kind of method that we use within a class. And again, it's like an entry point for the class. It's a default method that gets called every time an object gets created. So in here we're going to just set the title for the window, and to do that we're going to call set title, and I'm going to give it some text. I'm going to call it my first window. So when our program executes, the main method will get called. When we create our object my window, its constructor gets called, and we're supplying the constructor here. So when this constructor gets called, the setTitle method gets called, and when we run the program we should see a window that now has a title, my first window. So let's compile this and run it. And now you'll see we get a window with the title my first window. Now let's look at this window for a moment. It's basically just a frame. There's nothing inside the window, it's empty. If we want to add something into this window, there are a number of things that we need to do. At the moment it's not able to take any user interface components because it has no idea of how to lay out or place the components within this window. All it has is something called a content pane. So inside this empty space here is a content pane, but it has no arrangement of components or anything like that. So the next task that we need to do is take the content pane for the window and tell it how to lay out individual user interface components. So to do that, what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to get the content pane for the window. And we do that with the following code. Container C is equal to get content pane. Okay, so what this is going to do is this is going to grab a handle to the content pane for our window. Once we have that, then we can tell the content pane how to lay out different user interface components. So we do that by saying so we're going to set the layout for the content pane, and we do that by saying c.setLayout. Okay, so when we set the layout, we have a number of different choices. In Java, there are many different layout managers. There's FlowLayout, button, box layout, grid bag layout, border layout, and so on. So there's a whole slew of different layout managers that we can use. For the moment, we're just going to use a very simple layout manager called a FlowLayout manager. This is one of the very simple ones, and all it does is place user interface components from left to right, and when it runs out of space, it just moves down the window and fills up the window with the user interface components. So to set the layout, I'm going to set the layout using a FlowLayout manager. So I'm going to call setLayout, and I'm going to say new FlowLayout. And that will give me a new flow layout within the content pane. All that's left to do now is I want to add my button to the layout. So the button that we're going to create is going to be declared at the top of our class. So I'm going to say private JButton my button. Okay, so we're going to declare all of our user interface components that we use at the top of the class. So right inside the definition for the class here, I'm going to declare my button object or my button variable. I'm going to declare it as private, and we'll see why there's a good reason for that later on when we deal with objects in more detail. It's going to be a JButton. Again, JButton is part of the swing library. Okay, and the variable that I'm going to use is my button. So I've declared a variable of type JButton. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add my button to the layout. So I need to create the button first of all. So I'm going to say my button equals new JButton. And I'm going to add some text to the JButton. So the text on the button is going to be please press me. So now I have a new button object called my button, and it's of type JButton from the swing library. And once I've done that, I can now add that to my layout. So I can say c.add my button. And that's it. So we've seen that we can add a special method called a constructor. Inside of that we can set the Windows title. We can grab a handle to its content pane, set a layout for that content pane, and now we can add user interface components to that content pane or to that layout. So we need to create the user interface component. In order to do that, we declare a variable up the top of our class called myButton, and it's of type JButton. I need to create the button, bring the button into existence by saying myButton equals new JButton, and then I can add it to the layout. So when I compile and run this program now, we should see a window that contains a button. And here we have it. So now we've set the title, we have taken the content pane of the window and added a layout manager to it, a new flow layout, and now we have a button in that layout. So it's not very useful at the moment because nothing's happening when we press the button, and that's the next thing that we're going to look at. How do we actually get the program to do something when we press the button?